Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Recently did a story about the guy who challenged his opponents to a duel in a courtroom and about how the judge overseeing that case ordered the man to get a psych exam rather than grant his request for the duel. And I had several people comment on dueling in general, and I remember also a lot of comments when I the first story about that up in a video a while back. And somebody said, Steve, you understand that dueling technically is not illegal in a lot of states. And, you know, it's one of these things that it depends on how you look at it, because there was a time in America when dueling was tolerated, but it was never actually considered to be 100% acceptable. I know some famous duels in history: Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr, Andrew Jackson. And the point is that dueling did occur. There are laws against this. So generally speaking, if I hurt somebody on purpose, physically, that can often result in something bad happening to me legally. And if two people get together and agree that they're going to do this, the fact that you agree to the concept does not mean that it makes what you're doing legal. And so they'll tell you in law school, I think about day one of some classes, that you cannot consent to a battery, generally speaking. So if you punch somebody in the face, you cannot tell the police, hey, he asked me to do it. He consented to it. And it's considered against public policy to say that you can consent to that. I know people are going to say, Steve, what about boxing? And what about adult relationships where people sometimes appear to consent to things they might not consent to otherwise? And two things. First of all, is that sporting events have always been considered an exception to this. So we understand that playing football, people will hit each other physically. Boxing, they will literally punch each other. Of course, they're wearing gloves. It's a controlled environment. And boxing has been going back hundreds of years. So there are people out there who want to get it outlawed, don't get me wrong. But generally speaking, that's considered to be a separate setting than simply me standing on the street and going, oh yeah, I consented to let that man hit me in the head as hard as he wanted to. So that's not going to work. So generally speaking, dueling is simply against the law in the theory that if one of the people hurts the other person, that right there is against the law. Now, here's the funny part about all of this. Historically, I've got to tell you this because this is, to me, fascinating. It's a low threshold for somebody to make a video about, I guess, because it fascinates me. But there used to be an actual law on the books against dueling in many states, including Michigan. And a couple of years ago, a few legislators got together and said, you know, there's a bunch of outdated laws on the books. We should just repeal them. Many of them are stupid, and many of them were redundant. And a law against dueling is redundant. You don't need to have a law against dueling because it's already illegal for either of those parties to do what they want to do to the other party. So you should know that in the Michigan compiled laws, the MCLs, the blue books behind me, that as of, I'll read you the version from 2010. I understand this is 10 years ago. That's a reason I'm doing this. There was 750.172, Section 172, accepting challenge and abetting a duel. Any person who shall accept any challenge or who shall knowingly carry or deliver any challenge or message, whether a duel ensue or not, and every person who shall be present at the fighting of a duel with deadly weapons as an aid or second or surgeon, or who shall advise, encourage, or promote such duel, is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment for not more than 1 year or a fine of not more than $1,000, and is also disqualified as mentioned in the preceding section. So that law was actually passed in 1931. Why in 1931? I don't know. But it was against the law to accept a challenge for a duel or to take the message challenging someone else to a duel. And if you're at the duel, whether you're the dueler or simply as a second or even a surgeon at the duel, that you were guilty of a misdemeanor for any of those things. Now, the funny part is you'll notice that it doesn't address what happens if you're in the duel and you injure the other party, because that's already against the law. That's the whole point. So the dueling statute was not there to outlaw what you wanted to do to the other person. It was outlawing taking that crime, which is already a crime, which is assault and battery, and putting it into a setting that is a duel. So they determined that dueling itself didn't need to be outlawed. It was just silly and archaic. A couple years ago, the governor signed a bill where they went through and got rid of a bunch of outdated laws. So they voted to repeal dozens of outdated criminal measures that had remained on the shelf well past their expiration date. This is Jonathan Oosting of MLive writing this. The series of votes stretched out several hours as they talked about things such as the prohibition against cursing in front of women or children. There was a law in Michigan that said that you were not allowed to curse in front of women or children. You can curse in front of men. And generally speaking, when you see a law that designates something like that and makes it gender specific, and I understand that right there's a trigger word, and I apologize, but if you make it that specific, that it's probably a contrary thing to the law itself. So they withdrew that, or overrode that law. Chris Affandoulis of Grand Rapids Township said there were over 3,000 criminal statutes in the books. Many of them are outdated, redundant, and some of them are unconstitutional. So among the bills that were involved here, the penal code currently prohibiting duels or being present at a duel. The duel misdemeanor is punishable at that time 1 year in prison or fine of up to $1,000, but that got repealed. Likewise, the cursing in front of children. Believe it or not, it also used to be illegal to sing the national anthem out of tune or in any way that was considered to be musically inappropriate. And I can tell you that when Jose Feliciano sang the national anthem before a game of the Tigers World Series in 1968, it caused a brouhaha. And there were people arguing about whether or not he'd broken the law. There were also some really silly ones. Like, for instance, there was a law against walkathons because there was a time when people did walkathons and other like dance marathons where people would actually go out in an attempt to win a contest, push themselves beyond the limits of human capability, often injuring themselves. And they actually had outlawed walkathons. And that's long before they became a charity fundraiser thing, which is what they are now. And there were some other laws, like, for instance, there was a law that said that if the Department of Natural Resources encountered you and you're an able-bodied person and they were fighting a fire, they could basically commandeer you and say, you have to come with us and fight this fire. And there used to be a law that said if you didn't go, you're breaking the law. If the DNR encountered you and said, hey, we need your help for an emergency, we're about to get overwhelmed by this fire, can you help us? I think many people would help them. But the idea that if you don't help them, it's a crime, most people have got a problem with that. So the statute that got passed in 2015, again, it's Enrolled House Bill number 4248, and it got enacted as the regular session of 2015, the 98th legislature, and Act number 210, and it repealed the section of the Michigan Penal Code at 750 point, I forgot what the number was there, 568, nope, dueling, 171 to 173A, and that entire section has been repealed. So as far as there being a specific statute that outlaws dueling, it's no longer in the books in Michigan. My understanding is a lot of states don't have that law, or if they did, they've repealed it because it's considered outdated and archaic. But the idea that there's no law prohibiting dueling does not mean that you're allowed to duel. It just means that a law enforcement person will look at this and go, oh, I appeared on the scene. One person here has been injured by this person here. Oh, we'll arrest this person, take this person to the hospital. And you'll be charged thusly. You might not be charged with dueling, because that's not in the books anymore, but you'll be charged with whatever the crime is that you committed with whatever instrument of harm that you have in your hands. So I'm being vague on this on purpose for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is in the old days, you could duel with different things. You might duel with swords, you might duel with firearms. It's all kinds of things you can duel with. I mean, we probably duel with nunchucks. So, dueling itself, again, a lot of states have removed it from the books, but the guy who made the argument that he wanted to duel with either his ex-wife or his ex-wife's attorney said that it was not, explicitly outlawed in his state. And I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't do the research on that state. I like doing Michigan research better because that's from licensed to practice law. But a bigger question is, let's suppose that he goes out in a field with a sword to rend the soul from the body of his opponent. If he succeeds in doing that, he will then be charged with the crime that anybody would be charged with who had done that out in a field with a sword. So there you go. I hope that answers the question. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. You miss 100% of the shots you never take.